Alright, I'm going to show you how to use C# to get started. You'll notice I'm using the C# 2010 Express. That's just to make sure that whatever version of Visual Studio or C# you have, you should be able to use this. Even if you're on an earlier version like 2008, this should still work just fine. The time of making this, we also have Visual Studio 2013 out right now, which is a great version. Okay, so to start out, in the Start page, we see that there is a new project. If you don't have the Start page, you should be able to find it under the View menu. In the Express version, it's right here under Start page. In other ones, you might find it in other pages or other windows. Depends which version of Visual Studio you're running. Anyway, so we have the Start page. I could click New Project here, or I can go to File, New Project. Now that I've done that, I'm going to make sure that for my installed templates that I have selected, it should be in installed templates to begin with, that I've selected Visual C#. Depending on the system you've started, you may see Visual Basic, Visual C++, and a variety of other systems as well. But Visual C#, just the base one, none of the little sub-windows, and then Console Application, which is just a text window. We are going to call this Hello Me. You'll notice that each word starts with a capital letter and there is no space. In code, you shouldn't have a space, and this actually gets translated to part of the code for the name itself. So we don't put this into the code. It'll essentially replace all the lack of spaces with underscores. Alright, so now, hello me, hit OK. Now there's a lot of code here that it starts out with. It's a very simple program, but that doesn't really do anything yet. But what you should be aware of is that under this static void main, there are a pair of curly braces. There are several stages of them. The namespace, the class, and the void. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just to make this easier to read. But I'm going to be inside of the curly braces for the static void main. This is a function. The static void main is a function that runs every time the program starts, and it will execute all the code that's going to be inside of here. Once it gets to the end, the program ends. So let's start out. Console.writeLine. Now I want to point a couple things out here. I'm going to go back. Console. I typed in CON, and it selected console. The reason this is called IntelliSense, where it tries to figure out what you're actually wanting to type in. And you'll see that CON, the first word that actually starts with CON is console, which happens to be what I want. And it highlighted it. That means that all I have to do now is press enter or dot or space, and it will fill in the rest of the word for me. So I can hit enter, and it filled in the word. That's a good thing to pay attention to, especially for code words you reuse a lot. Because you can start coding a lot faster. Alright, next I'm going to hit dot, and if dot didn't show up, that means that you may have something wrong, such as, when I hit the dot, it comes up with this extra IntelliSense window showing me all of the functions and methods and properties underneath console. So if that didn't show up, there's a good chance you may have had a lowercase c here, for instance. I hit dot, nothing happens. So, another trick, if I didn't have this capitalized already to the right case, I can hit Control Space. IntelliSense comes up, I can even just double click on this. Filled in the right word. Backspace, hit the dot again, and that comes up with IntelliSense again. Now I'm going to tell it to write a line. You could just scroll through this list and see all these different things, like the background color, setting it, what the width is, clearing the screen, making a beep noise. We're going to look at write line, so I'm just going to double click that right now. But write line, you'll notice it has a capital W, capital L, and no space. And now I'm going to open parentheses, close parentheses, semicolon. Now technically, this will write a line of text which will have absolutely no contents. It'll be a blank line of text, so essentially we'll be on the second line of text in the window. I'm going to press the play button, which didn't show up over here. I'm going to actually hit Control F5. Control F5 puts a little press any key to continue. If you pressed F5 or pressed the play button, it would have shown up so quickly and disappeared so quickly that you may not have even seen it. Alright, but Control F5 forced it to pause at the end so I could at least see that there was something on there. Now I can see that there's one line of text and then it says press any key to continue. But I want this to actually just show up normally. So I want it to stop. Remember what I told you before, the main method of the program, as soon as it runs all of the code inside of it, and then as soon as it gets to the end, it exits the program. So over here, I need it to do something that will stop the program from executing until the user does something. So I'm going to say console.readline. Also, with an open and close parentheses, Shift-9, Shift-0, and a semicolon. Every line of code, almost every line of code in the program, needs a semicolon at the end. This tells the compiler that the line is actually done. I could technically split this up onto multiple lines, and the program would still work. Here's the program. You can see I'm on the second line, and if I hit enter, the program ends. I'm going to put this little line back. It just looks better like this. Now, another option is that we can actually type in text. This is a Hello Me application after all. So I'm going to say Hello Dan. And this needs to be inside of a pair of double quote marks, which is the shift quote next to the enter key. Alright, so Hello Dan, exclamation. You can say whatever you want to in here. And when we run the program, it says Hello Dan, and then waits, and you can press enter to end the program. Alright, now let's upgrade this a little bit. I'm going to start using variables. I'm going to say string, lowercase string. You'll notice that there are two cases of string. I can use uppercase and lowercase. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Uppercase string is just a reference back to lowercase string. Personally, I use lowercase string all the time as a standard. Alright, so string name, you'll notice all lowercase, equals, and in quotes, Dan. And actually, I'm going to change this slightly. I'm going to call it Bob. The reason I'm calling it Bob is because my code already said Dan, and I want to change this. I'm going to use something called concatenation now. And in concatenation, we would take this line, and we would say, instead of Dan, what I'm doing is I'm taking a string. This is a string as well. Name is a string. Hello is a string inside of the quotes. So we're saying hello space. Remember, just because we're adding two strings together doesn't mean it's going to magically add a space. We have to tell it every character we want. So I'm saying hello, then I'm adding the name to it, so it's going to be hello space Bob, and then an exclamation point. It's adding an exclamation point to the end. So you can add strings together, which essentially means it's appending them. So now I'm going to press F5. Alright, hello Bob. So here is the code down here. Let me do this. Hello Bob. Alright, now I press enter, the program ends. So what we've just done is concatenated the string. We've put the string together. Now why would we actually do that? In our previous line, which looked more like this, just by looking at this line, we could tell exactly what was going to happen. We could say it was going to write text to the screen that was going to say, Hello Dan. That is exactly what this line was going to do. But why write a program to do something that's never going to change? part of the main feature, part of the main benefit of a program is that it can actually change what it does based on the input it gets. So in this case, if we were to just look at this line of the code, we wouldn't be able to tell what it's going to do. We know it's going to write a line of text. We know it's saying hello, and it's using a variable called name. Since the variable is called name, this gives us an idea that we might actually be, it probably will be an actual name, like Bob or Dan. It's saying hello to a person, most likely. But we're going to change the program a little bit now. I'm going to say console.writeLine, and you'll notice I'm doing this above or right after the string name and right above where we actually say hello. I'm going to say, what is your name? And then you'll notice over here I had to declare what type of variable name was. If I reuse it again, I don't need to declare what type it is or what value it is, but I can do stuff. So first I created a string called name, and then I set it to equal Bob. I can also say name equals Dan. Even though I initially set it to Bob, name can change to anything I want it to. And then this should say hello Dan. I'm going to press play, move the project over, and it does. What's your name? Hello Dan. But this, just setting it to Dan, again, we look at this code, if we were to look at all the lines of code, we know exactly what's going to happen. Let's change that to make it dependent on the user. Instead of it equaling Dan, a string that we set here in the code, I'm going to say it equals console.readLine. You'll notice it's the exact same thing we had down here, which just waits for us to press enter, but that's because readLine reads all the characters of text until you press the word enter. Once you press the word enter, it returns them. In this first one, we didn't do a thing with it. We just read the line, and it basically waited until we hit space, or until we hit enter. This one, once we hit enter, it takes the memory, and we have something that's actually using it now. Name is getting set. I'm going to press play. What is your name? Now it's asking me something. Okay, my name is Arthur. Hello, Arthur. If I run it again, what is your name? I'm going to just hit enter without typing in anything. Hello. Alright. So this is how we can start using a variable, a string, to change how our code reacts. Now, a couple other things that I want to point out before I end this particular video is comments. Comments are particularly valuable. This is for lines of code that you don't want there anymore, or to help explain things. So let's say I no longer wanted it to ask what the name was. I could put 2 slashes in front of it, 2 forward slashes. This is on the same key as the question mark. Alright, so console.writeLine, what's your name? That shouldn't ask it. In fact, you notice it's been put into green text. I'm going to press F5, pass the program over, and over here it doesn't actually say what is your name. I will just type something in, and it says hello ASDF. It read the line, set the name variable, and then it printed the name back out. That all worked, except this one line. Another option you can use for it is just to say, here we print a hello world, hello me. Anything on this line after the slashes will not get used. Alright, now this particular line, this is not a very valuable comment. Valuable comments explain the exact purpose of what we want. This one, we can essentially take a look at the code, and it tells us really, really quickly what's actually happening here. So that doesn't matter too much. When we get larger, more complicated programs, our comments are going to become vital to be able to look back and realize what we were doing. Alright, so that's it.